How you doing, Kevin here? So I just wanted to quickly speak to you about this interview I've done recently with a guy called Neil Ryder. So Neil and I have worked together probably over the last 4 years now on the investment side of things. But he's just written a book, and one thing that captures me about Neil is his attitude is very different to most independent advisors, and that he holds the same sort of values that we do, and that's that one of value and living full and having the freedom of choice to sort of live the life on your terms. So he speaks specifically about investing, but also having multiple revenue streams. So just because you may be in a job, that you love or have a career, and you don't want to be an entrepreneur, but what it means is that to have that type of mindset, to keep an eye out for multiple revenue streams and not buy into the system as what Neil talks about, is extremely important to not only your future, but your quality of life here and now. So if you're in that position where you feel like you're on a treadmill and you don't really have enough money at the end of the month, or maybe you've got this pension and you realize that it's actually not doing anything, or an ISA or any other type of savings, then this interview will be very insightful for you. And just enjoy it and listen to some of the tips that he says, and I hope you'll find it very useful. Enjoy, guys.
Well, financial freedom is really about going on a journey, but a lot depends on where the starting point is. And for many people, the starting point is the financial education that we've had to date. And the world over, financial education is extremely poor. Financial education is traditionally what our parents told us. And what were we told? Get a good education with a good job and a good pension. Now, it may have worked for them, but today it just doesn't work. And where we've got to go is we've got to go now and have done a very, very different route. Well, my story is that probably for the best part of 40 years, I followed the financial education that I was given to by my parents. I followed the system. I did the things that we were told to do. I invested in the way that we were told to invest. And in 2010 we had what we affectionately call our oh shit moment, and that was a point I took control of my financial future. I stopped exchanging time for money and began my journey to financial freedom. And I've written a book about this, which hopefully will be, it's going to be available from the 21st of April. So we'll see where that goes. I think the first step is realising that exchanging time for money will never get you to financial freedom. The system stops you through the tax system of ever really getting rich, because you can't double the amount you earn by doubling the number of hours that you work. So you're taxed, you're kept at a level of income, and the level of income means that you stay in a job. And what people need to understand is that job is an acronym for just over broke. And the whole thing is about keeping you just at the right kind of level of income. And when you start to earn too much, or when we have the ability to increase the amount of money that we earn, then the system throws other little subtle things in. So you may notice at the moment that credit limits on credit cards are all going up. I mean, the other day my wife had a letter from one of her credit card companies almost trebling the credit limit that she had on her card. So what it does is it soaks up any spare income that you've got, and then it raises the interest rates. So then you get sucked back in to the system. So it keeps you at a level where you're dependent and you remain compliant. I think it has to be about seeking sources of passive income. It's how do you make money for you. And I think it's also about really understanding the power of compounding. I mean, Einstein described compounding as the eighth wonder of the world. And he said that those that understand it earn it, those that don't pay it. And we just do a simple little exercise with clients. And that is to say to them, look, you've got a choice. I've got £1 million in this hand and you can have that today. Or I've got a penny in this hand. But this penny I'll double every day for a month. So which one do you want? You can have an instant £1 million, or you can have the outcome in 31 days' time of this penny being doubled every day for 31 days. Now, a lot depends how probably eager people are and whether they're looking at short-term or long-term in terms of their thinking. But if they waited that 31 days would make that penny worth over 10.4 million. And I think that compounding all happens right at the end. So when you invest a small amount of money, if you can put it into a position where it is going to compound, and by compounding we mean that the interest that you gain in a particular period is added to the capital. So it's the ability to almost plant a seed and let it grow and nurture it in the right kind of environment. So I think compounding is really, really important. And it's also about getting a good financial education. And how do you get that good financial education? Well, I think that's about reading. That's about finding the right kind of books to read. It's also about networking with the right kind of people. Because a lot of people don't get this. They're still very, very much in what I would call old thinking. And they still follow the compliant attitude that the system requires. And I think the final thing that I would do is find a mentor and work with somebody who's already on this journey and can sit with you and talk with you and help you to grow. And I think that's where I would certainly be looking to go. I think the big takeaway is about recognising that you have to break your dependence of the system. You have to break your dependence of the status quo and the myths that surround it. We're educated to be compliant, to believe that financial investments need to be made in a regulated environment. But we never challenge the reasons why. Because we don't think, we trust the system in what it tells us. But we have to recognise that, that there are certain benefits, not necessarily to ourselves, that come from this. There are many, many other interested parties that probably benefit more from compliance than we do ourselves. So you have to challenge the reasons why. I've done it and I've not looked back. I'd like to think that I've carved a path out through the jungle, and hopefully other people can now follow the path that we're setting. I think this when you're breaking out of the old way of thinking, you've been conditioned, you've been indoctrinated. The system has moulded you in a particular way to think down a particular route. You follow the status quo. You only invest in regulated investments, and we accept almost what we're given. We're accepting the low returns, on money that we put in the bank. I mean, I had a letter from my bank telling me that our savings interest rates were being reduced to 0.05% per annum. Yet I've got investments that I'm making which are earning anywhere from between 1 and 5% per month. And all I'm doing is doing what the banks, what the standard investors are doing with my money overnight. But they're keeping all of their, the vast majority of the profits or the gains to run their businesses, their big overhead businesses. They pay bonuses. And all we're doing is using those kind of investments to cut out the middleman and take the gains ourselves. So it is a little bit of almost like stepping over onto across the abyss. And if you can think back to, say, something like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where he's there and he's facing that ravine and he knows that there's an entrance the tunnel over there, which is going to take him to the Holy Grail. But he makes a leap of faith and steps off into that abyss, onto this invisible bridge. But when he gets to the other side, he grabs a handful of sand and throws it across, so those that follow can see that where the bridge is. And hopefully the journey that I've been on since 2010 and the book that we've now put together, it is almost about putting that sand across the bridge so others can follow. It's a mental thing. It's trusting another way of thinking. It's trusting these investments that we're told are unregulated, and because they're unregulated, they're high risk. But these unregulated investments, if you just take for example something simple like forex trading. Now we're told never to go there, but what do the banks do with the money that's in your current account once the banking hours are over? They give it to proprietary traders to trade overnight on the forex markets. But it's done in such a way that the traders know that the same amount of money has got to go back the next morning. So it's not necessarily high risk. And they do that with our money. They earn, a good trader will make around 1% per day. And I work with good traders and I can see the trades that they're doing. But rather than that money going back to the bank to pay for their lavish headquarters, the huge, great big bonuses that the people get within the bank, we're benefiting directly. We've cut that middle person out. And it's just realising what's actually going on in these financial markets. It's just questioning who's really gaining from the investments that I'm being encouraged to make in this regulated environment. And really all we're doing is just moving across and using the people, using the investments that the regulated investments are making, but we're cutting out that middle person. And there's nothing wrong with them. They're not unsafe at all. Process, I think, is really we operate a three-step process. And the first thing is that you've got to be able to articulate your dream. You've got to be able to tell us, what it is that you're looking to achieve. Because once you can start to do that, then you can start to understand what this thing looks like. What is it actually going to take? Then we can start to analyse. And I think the analysis then is around looking at what resources are available. These may be cash resources, they might be pension resources. There may even be things like, well, what's your capability to actually borrow money? It may be from friends, it may be from family. I don't actually encourage people to borrow to invest. They've got to understand the risk really involved with that. But we've got to analyse and we've got to understand all of the options. And then once we've articulated the dream and we've analysed what's actually available, then we can start to put a plan of action in place. But that action plan is not just going to be a straight line of going from A to B. It's going to go from A to M to L to Z and backwards and forwards all the way through. So periodically we've got to come back and we've got to sit down again and we've got to articulate where we've actually got to, what's actually happened. Then we analyse again and then we take action again. So it's almost like a cyclical process of setting a plan and evaluating it and then moving forward again. But I think a lot of it also is in terms of once we articulate the dream and when we analyse, I think analysing is also about analysing about our mental state as to where we are. What's our attitude to risk? And sometimes what we do is that we play a board game. It's a bit like Monopoly on steroids, but this game, and it's a cash flow game, is very, very much about helping you to understand what your attitude to risk is. But you're doing it in a safe environment. You're doing it with play money. If you lose the lot, you lose the lot. But when you walk out the room, you're no worse off. And it's helping people to understand what these investment processes might look like. What is available to you? What can you do? And how do you build the strategies? So, some people have already got the financial education. They already understand the nuts and bolts. They're broken out of the traditional financial education. Others are still very, very much at the infancy of the journey. And maybe what they've then got to do as a result of a conversation that we have is we've got to go say to them, look, go read the books first. Go understand, what's going on in your own mind. Because, unless you can overcome that fear, unless you're prepared to a degree to take a little bit of a leap of faith, to actually recognise that what you've been told isn't necessarily true, that maybe it is a bit of a myth. And until you can start to come to terms with that, then really you can't start to make any progress forward. I don't think there's necessarily common themes. I think it falls into maybe two areas. There's one area of people who they're quite freely able to articulate what it is that they want to achieve. But I think there's also a group of people who can't freely articulate. They almost put artificial boundaries around it. And if you then ask them to tell you what they're going to do to get there, then they find that extremely difficult. It's very, very difficult to get people to talk in a future tense. But if you can get people to actually give us a picture, but then we do a clever little trick with them, we turn it round and we get them to talk about it in the past tense. What did you do to get here? Now, we're much more able to tell people what we did as opposed to what we're going to do. So you've got to get people to work through things and to think in slightly different ways. You've got to take them, just imagine you've got there. Now tell me what you did to get here. It's a trick I used to use as a management consultant when I was working with sales teams, when they were trying to put together their budgets, 2, 3, 4 year sales forecasts. So what I always used to do was to get them to articulate what the 2-year goal was, what the 3-year goal was, what it looked like. How big was it? What were the numbers? And then once we'd done that, is to get them back in the room and to say, okay, well, look, we'd celebrate. We'd open a bottle of champagne, we'd congratulate them on achieving the goal. And then we'd just turn around to them and say, well, what did you do to get there? And they can articulate that very, very easily. But if you set somebody and say, right, this is what your turnover's got to be in 3 years' time. Now, what are you going to do to get there? They'll just sit and look at you and say, I haven't got a clue. So it's just understanding the way that the mind will work, and then just unlocking the little things that are there and just getting them to talk in different ways.
Fantastic, great. And just finally, Neil, what's the name of the book?
The book is called Financial Freedom, right? And there's a book launch, a formal book launch on the 21st of April, which will be a dinner, and it will be a charitable event. And hopefully we'll see you there.
Yes, you will. Inspiring as ever, Neil. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.